Can Mac Jones hit the 300-yard bonus once again? That and more today on Showdown coverage brought to you by SharpFootballAnalysis.com. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, and we will get into the slate. So today we've got New England taking on Arizona. New England is 1.5-point favorites on the road in Arizona. A little bit of a surprise. The total is also 43.5, which is another little bit of a surprise, I guess. We've seen New England at times be a successful offense. There just doesn't seem to be much of a rhyme or reason. I wrote it in the article 2 weeks ago. New England had a ton of success when Mac Jones hit the 300-yard bonus. He threw like 30 times in that game. But then just a week, and that was against Minnesota, and then just a week later against the Bills, another top 3 passing rate offense, and then Mac Jones comes out and throws for like under 200 yards. So there's not a ton of rhyme or reason, and we're missing Jacoby Myers in this game, which is going to make a difference for a lot of these guys. So we'll go ahead and jump into the slate. First thing that pops out is that DeAndre Hopkins is 11,600. Not only that, but Kyler Murray's 11,200. So stacking those two is going to be very expensive, and I don't even know that you're going to get much of an ownership discount on DeAndre Hopkins, even with that cost. So DeAndre Hopkins might be someone I'm looking to avoid in like single entry or three max, just as a pretty easy pivot point. We could make a lot of very unique lineups without DeAndre Hopkins, with still similar medium projections and things like that. Still viable lineups to be had without DeAndre Hopkins this week. So Kyler Murray at 11,200. Well, we're looking to stack favorites for the most part, and if you think that New England can kind of cover by a good bit in this game, then you're already going to get naturally unique by playing 3, 4 Patriots players. So Kyler Murray to me fits better in the flex because there's so many cheap, viable options at captain. But you could still pair Kyler Murray with like Marquise Brown or even like a Greg Dortch in the flex and still play 4 Patriots and be pretty unique. James Conner's a very solid play at 10,000, perfectly priced. Wouldn't think he would be more or less. Had 22 touches last week, I believe, and played 97% of the snaps. So he's going to be the only running back involved against the Patriots coming off the bye. He should be healthy. So James Conner is one of the better plays of the slate. Probably a good pivot option if you don't want to go with Ramondre Stevenson because Ramondre Stevenson's like $2,000 too cheap, and so James Conner can, with the extra $1,200 that you spend on James Conner, if you're not playing Ramondre, um, you might be adding a little bit extra uniqueness there. Of course, the two can be played together as well. Ramondre is going to be involved in the passing game, so he can still succeed in games where Arizona takes a pretty sizable lead. Mac Jones, I will be building around Mac Jones heavily, and I'll go down with that ship. I mean, not somebody that I typically would enjoy riding with, but I think that New England can cover in this game. I think that they're going to pass a lot if they're going to win this game. So Mac Jones definitely fits the bill, and he can hit the 300-yard bonus even without Jacoby Myers. Jacoby Myers won't make a big difference in the yardage total. It just makes a difference in kind of how that offense operates. They would be operating a little more smooth with Jacoby Myers. Next is Ramondre Stevenson. He'll be the chalkiest player of the slate, probably like 80% ownership, way, way too cheap. If you were less than 80% ownership, that would be fantastic because I'm still going to play him. I might play him in every lineup. Um, he's going to be involved heavily if the Patriots are up. He's going to be involved heavily if the Patriots are down. So Ramondre Stevenson has 10 target upside. He goes well with Mac Jones if you want to throw Ramondre Stevenson in at captain and then pair him with Mac Jones and then throw in someone like Tyquan Thornton or someone like that who doesn't need a ton of production to pay off on their price so that they're not eating too heavily into Ramondre Stevenson's captain bid. Marquise Brown's going to be my favorite play on the Cardinals. So they're going to be without Rondell Moore, and it was already a pretty condensed target tree. Marquise Brown had, I think, 8 targets in his first game. DeAndre Hopkins is averaging 10 targets a game. So I think that it's pretty easy to say that both wide receivers should probably get about 10 targets in this game. Greg Dortch will be the third option, and he had 10 targets last week, as a matter of fact. He will be playing about 100% as well. So I like Marquise Brown a lot at 7,600, especially at captain. His ownership is going to be reasonable, I think. You might say it's out of hand if it's over 45%, but it's really not because he's far too cheap, uh, especially with the total being a little higher than I thought it would be, 43.5. So I expect Marquise Brown to be relatively owned, but still well worth it at his cost, and especially if it's a captain. So you could play Marquise Brown a captain with Kyler Murray, and this is a lineup that I'm going to build here in just a few minutes. You've got all of your notable players in a row here. Damian Harris out probably. He's got the doubtful next to his name, but we're expecting him not to play. Rondell Moore out. Jacoby Myers out. Brings us down to the cluster of New England receivers. So we have Devontae Parker, Hunter Henry, and Kendrick Bourne all in the $5,000 range. Devontae Parker is my favorite. He's demonstrated the highest ceiling. He had like 156 yards with Jacoby Myers out in week 4. Not saying that you're going to get that type of production, but he, I guess, still has it, quote unquote. He's been involved in recent weeks, I think, 4 receptions in the past 2 weeks, and he will just be the primary benefactor of Byron Murphy being out of the lineup for the Cardinals. So I expect Devontae Parker to be the most productive player for the New England Patriots. Kendrick Bourne's a fine dart throw, but he has not been super involved of late. Actually, Nelson Aguilar played more snaps, and then even Tyquan Thornton played more snaps. So Kendrick Bourne, I mean, if you're playing large field 150 max, he still makes the lineup, still makes the player pool rather. But I don't expect to have a ton of exposure to Kendrick Bourne. I prefer both Aguilar and Tyquan Thornton actually pretty much straight up, regardless of price. AJ Green's in a similar boat. I mean, he's 5,200 and Greg Dortch is in the $2,000 range. So there's really just no incentive to play AJ Green. So Nelson Aguilar is going to be a full-time player. He is 5,000. You can get not similar production, but you could get similar snap share if you go with Tyquan Thornton. But I still think that Aguilar is like a sneaky good stack with Mac Jones at 5,000. Skip the defenses, go to Jonnu Smith. He just hasn't been quite involved consistently enough. Of course, it is the Arizona Cardinals, and we love playing tight ends against them. I guess I shouldn't have skipped Hunter Henry in that conversation. Hunter Henry is also a very good play. I think that his ownership is going to be a little bit higher than Nelson Aguilar, so I prefer Aguilar, but Hunter Henry's still a fantastic play, still should have exposure to. But Jonnu is just not much consistency in his usage. So there's nothing really to point to. Like we know that he's going to be involved in X, Y, and Z. In fact, the last time I remember him almost making an impact, he fumbled. So that was quite unfortunate. But at 3,000, it's not really like you could go with Trey McBride, for example, for $600 less, and you're getting pretty much the same thing as Jonnu Smith. And then Greg Dortch is a way better play than pretty much any of them. And then Tyquan Thornton is a better play than Jonnu Smith. And you're not taking like too much of an ownership hit by going with any of those guys besides Greg Dortch. So not a lot of reason to go with Jonnu. Ingram's not going to play at all, pretty much 97%, like I said for James Conner 2 weeks ago. Trey McBride has done next to nothing since he's taken over for Zach Ertz, but he is a full-time player, so I don't mind getting him in my builds for 150 max when he's only 2,400, and Greg Dortch is going to be like 40% owned or something like that. So with Greg Dortch so popular, it is a good time to pivot to Trey McBride. I would say the same thing for Robbie Anderson, especially since they go with so much for wide receiver sets. The Cardinals do, but Robbie Anderson, I mean, all he's done since he's gone to with the Cardinals is just had some 3 notable drops, I think. So I don't really see a ton of purpose in playing Robbie Anderson. I would rather just eat the chalk with Greg Dortch and then get more unique with like my mid-range Patriots receivers. And then the last player we're going to talk about is Tyquan Thornton, who played 40% of the snaps last week. He pretty much took over for Kendrick Bourne and is vying for like the third or to second wide receiver role with Nelson Aguilar since Jacoby Myers is out. So I would much rather, if I'm not going with Dortch, I would much rather go with Thornton and then in large field just go with McBride on occasion just to get different from your Dortch lineups. I would not play Dortch and McBride together. I just think you sacrifice too much ceiling in that instance. So let's build a quick lineup I talked about with Marquise Brown at captain and then Kyler Murray, but then we still want to go with a Patriots stack. So we're going to go with Marquise Brown at captain. And then we want Ramondre Stevenson in pretty much every lineup. We're also going to want Mac Jones. We're going to have to go down here to Tyquan Thornton, see how much we have left, 7,600. So we can do basically any of the Patriots options with this lineup. So you could go Devontae Parker, you could go Hunter Henry, you could go Kendrick Bourne, you could go Nelson Aguilar here. With Marquise Brown at captain, you just give yourself so much room to work around these mid-range New England players. And then Stevenson at 8,800 does you a ton of favors too, because that's just far too cheap for him. He should be at least 10,000. For me, I guess I'll complete the lineup. I would probably go Hunter Henry here. So that puts me at Marquise Brown at captain, Ramondre Stevenson, Kyler Murray, Mac Jones, Tyquan Thornton, and Hunter Henry. That leaves $2,000 on the table, and it should be plenty unique. Of course, you could go with the 3-3 here where you take out Tyquan Thornton and put in Greg Dortch, and you would get a higher median projection, but you're also going to add a ton of ownership in that case. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you all so much for coming out. This has been Showdown Coverage brought to you by SharpFootballAnalysis.com. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, and I will catch y'all next week.